Okay, today's topic is the time boxing model for developing a software. So whatever models which have discussed, it is little bit contrast with them because most of the process models are concentrating on the requirements, designing, deploying several aspects and how they can be done. The approaches are different when we discuss about a particular process models. So when coming to the time boxing model, so time boxing model is one special kind of a model which concentrates on the time rather than the requirements or any other aspects of development cycle. First, it concentrates on the time, the duration at which the software is going to be submitted. So that is what the main issue with the time boxing model. That is, it concentrates on the time rather than the other issues. When we compare it with the waterfall model, when we compare the time boxing to the waterfall model, the major difference, what happens in the waterfall model? Anyone? Waterfall model concentrates on one thing. Based on that, the development will start. So what is that? The question is waterfall model concentrating on a special task rather than the other issues. What is that? Anyone can answer in the chat box. Make it fast so that I can proceed. Because how many of you are following or not following, we don't know. Because we don't have any assessment test right now. I think in coming classes, we should put some kind of a test also regarding the subject. So please try to answer the question, that is, what is the speciality of the waterfall model? What is the basic feature of the waterfall model? And what does it concentrates on majorly? Anyone can answer in the chat box. You can write it or type it. Make it fast. I think no one is ready to answer the question. I think so. Okay, let me say the answer. That is, waterfall model majorly concentrates on the requirements gathering. That is the first step which will be followed in waterfall model. Requirements gathering is majorly concentrated in waterfall model. So based on the requirements, the progress of the software will be decided. Now, what happens with the time boxing model? Because time boxing, the name itself suggests that time box. So with there is one kind of a specified time. Okay, based on that time, the development will be started. So development, all the delivery should be done within the time period. So this is about time boxing model. Time boxing model concentrates on the time itself. Okay, I think everyone is clear with this. That is, waterfall model concentrates on requirements gathering. More concentration is on requirements gathering. When compared to time boxing model concentrating on the time in which the development or the delivery should be done. And when you compare with the other process models like prototyping or iterative or RUP models, they will be concentrating on various other issues. Prototyping model also concentrating on the requirements gathering with a continuous communication between the customer. So the communication between, there is also concentration about requirements gathering only. In RUP model, there are different phases are there. And after each completion of every phase, there is other phase to be starting under RUP. There are four types of phases are there in RUP, I think. Inception, elaboration, construction, transition. So these are the phases. So after inception, elaboration phase will start. During the inception, elaboration will not start its execution. So parallel processing or parallel working out is not possible. Now, coming to time boxing model, to speed up the development of a software or to shorten the delivery time of a software, time boxing model is used. And one more approach is used by this model is parallelism. Now, what do you mean by parallelism? Parallelism is nothing but if you there are two instructions are there. Let us suppose that there are two instructions. Processor is executing first instruction. While executing this instruction, the second instruction may start its execution also. Simultaneously, two instructions can be executed. It means, for example, only I'm saying this one. Similarly, here parallelism is nothing but if one phase is started, before it is completing, the second phase may start its working. Now, how it is done, what are the issues are there, we will be discussing in depth with that. So, one thing is clear is that time boxing is majorly concentrating on time and the approach is parallelism. So, this is what deals with the time boxing. Let us see the topics, what it may can encounter. So it is also an iterative kind of executing or developing a software, and it is linear sequence of iterations. It means that if one iteration completes its task, then second iteration will start. If it is a linear time boxing model, try to understand here. If it is a linear time boxing model, then if one instruction is completed, then only the second iteration will start. So that is, if first iteration is completed, then the second iteration starts only when first one is completed, if it is linear time boxing model. So here in this, each iteration is a mini waterfall, decides the specifications, then plan the iteration. So each iteration is a mini waterfall model. Every iteration, which is part of this linear sequence time boxing model, every iteration will be behaving like a waterfall model, concentrating on the specifications. Based on the specifications, planning of that iteration will be done. Now, next, in time boxing, fix an iteration duration. So, as I said, iteration duration, to what extent, to what time that iteration should be done. Try to understand here. If the iteration is regarding specifications or any other thing, if the iteration contains whether sub processes like requirements analysis design, so that iteration duration will be fixed as part of the time boxing. Then the remaining things will be done. So then the determination of specifications will be done. Now, in the next point, it is mentioned as dividing each iteration in a few equal stages. So every iteration is divided into equal stages, and it is using one kind of a concept called as pipelining concept. Pipelining concept is regarding the hardware. So pipelining, when you discuss this pipelining concept in hardware design, it means that if you are executing one instruction, it means that the second instruction can be executed parallelly. The concept of pipelining is nothing but two instructions can be executed parallelly. Similarly here, two stages or two iterations can be started parallelly. The concept which is used in the time boxing model. So next, so generally the iterative development starts with the functionality of each iteration, fixing the functionalities. Then planning will be done, and then execution will be done according to general iterative model. In time boxing iterations, duration is fixed regarding the iteration, and based on the duration, the functionalities to be adjusted according to that duration to fit into that time period. So completion time is fixed, the functionality to be developed delivered to be flexible. Okay, so that is what the approach lies with the time boxing model. So what is the usage of it? So what happens if we go with the time boxing model? So it is useful as we compare with the other models. It is very much useful in some situations, not all the situations, some situations that the delivery times of the software will be less when compared to the other. When you compare the waterfall model, see the duration of completing of a software with the waterfall model approach, it may take too much time. Let us say that if it is 6 months, it may go cross with that one. It may go beyond that one. That is, it may raise up to 9 months also. But here, the time is fixed so that the remaining things can be adjusted based on the time. Remaining things may be adjusted based on the time. Maybe it may be manpower, maybe other resources or the teams. There will be a dedicated teams will be there, especially for different types of iterations or different types of phases which are divided under time boxing model. So in the next point, it is saying that makes time a non-negotiable parameter and helps focus attention on the schedule. So here time is more, concentration will be done. So non-negotiable, that is there is no compromise on time, and it prevents the requirements bloating. What do you mean by requirements bloating? It means that it is not giving an scope for the changes to be made which are given by the customers at the time of developing. At the time of software development, the requirements cannot be added on, keep on adding. So overall development time is still unchanged, because if you are adding changes to the development, but the schedule is fixed here, so make the adjustment to it. So the management will be more complex when you come across the management issues of scheduling every iteration. So what happens here is, if you add changes to the phases, then the iteration will not change its duration also. The duration is fixed. So based on the requirements, the adjustment should be made. And here comes more complexity regarding the management, configuration management. So see, let us see what happens if pipelining approach or concept is used. What happens if pipelining concept is used? It means that multiple iterations executing in parallel. Multiple iterations executing in parallel. So what happens with this? It can reduce the average completion time by exploiting the parallelism. So by using parallelism approach, we can reduce the completion time of the software. So for parallel execution, pipelining concept is used from hardware. So this may lead to the time boxing process model. I will brief it once again up to this slide. That is to speed up the development and to have a parallelism between the different iterations for speeding up. It means that a new iteration commences before the system produced by the current iteration is released so that the development of new phase so that the development of the new phase happens in parallel with the first iteration which has been used. So we can say this, all these things which we have discussed, like concentrating on the time and regarding the what is that parallelism or pipelining concept. So these all are possible if we have a time boxing process model. So all these things will be clubbed into time boxing process model. Let us see what happens with this time boxing model. So whatever we discussed, they all will be part of this model as a development strategy in a software. So what happens in this? These are some of the basic points which are there in the time boxing model. Development is done iteratively in a fixed duration time boxes. I repeat once again, development is done iteratively in fixed duration time boxes. So you can say that it is concentrating on time. Next, second point, each time box is divided in fixed stages. So there are some stages will be there. What are the stages we will see? So each stage performs a clearly defined task that can be done independently from the other. So you try to understand here, every time box is nothing but one duration. Okay, one duration where particular stages will be there. So every stage will perform a defined task which are independent from the others. So each stage have equal duration with the other stages. So there is a dedicated team for each stage which are available under time box. So in the next point, when one stage team finishes, at one stage team finishes its task, it will hand over the project to the next team. I repeat once again, the previous point it is mentioned as there is a dedicated team for each stage development. So when at one stage the team finishes its job, it will be handing over that project to the next team to start the second stage. So with this type of time boxes, it reduces the cycle time of completing a project. So as the stages have dedicated teams, simultaneous execution of different iterations are also possible. So there are separate teams for every stage. So what happens here is, if first stage has started, then the second stage can be simultaneously start itself. So that is what it is mentioning. So let us come to the iteration. As we know, the time box contains different stages. What are those stages? So those stages are analysis. Building the project analysis is nothing but regarding requirements analysis. Based on the requirements analysis, we will be building some kind of a project and testing them. And next, the third one is deployment. And the third one is deployment. So these stages are approximately equal. So these stages are approximately equal in many situations. And it has to be adjusted within the durations which have been set by the time box. And also the team size. So how many members have to be implemented or used for the development of these things. So let us say that they have separate teams for analysis, building, deploying. So analysis team will be there, building team will be there, and deployment team will be there. So these are the separate dedicated teams which have been allotted for iterations which are part of stages in the time box. So you try to see it. Let us see in the diagram when I will show you the diagram, then you can understand. Okay, let me explain this here in the pipelined execution of time boxing model. What do you mean by this? It is nothing but parallel executing of iterations. So what happens here is first analysis team will start executing iteration 1. What do you mean with this? Analysis team. AT is nothing but analysis team starts executing the first iteration. So in first iteration, it is going through the requirements phase. Let us see here. Here you have requirements, building, deploy. So according to the point, we are saying that the analysis team will enter into the requirements phase and start analyzing the requirements. Okay, that is what the slide is saying. So next point, it is saying that after analysis team finishes, hands over iteration 1 to building team. So what do you mean by this? Hands over it to building team starts executing iteration 2. So according to the diagram, let us consider this. This is first iteration, this is second iteration, this is third iteration, and this is fourth iteration. So in every iteration, there are 3 stages are there, that is requirements, build, deployment. So the analysis team started the iteration 1. So after analyzing the requirements, so what happens? The analysis team will hand over the first iteration of completing the first stage, giving to the building team. So analysis team will give the iteration 1 to the building team. Then the analysis team will go through the second iteration. So then they can start the analysis of the second iteration while it has handed over the requirements to the building team in the iteration 1. So this is what parallelism, pipelining concept. So that is what it is saying. Next, analysis team finishes iteration 2, hands over to the building team. So building team finishes iteration 1 and hands over to the deployment team. So what happening? After analysis team finished its second iteration also, they handed over it to the building team. So while handing over the iteration 2 to the building team, iteration 1 has completed its building team also. So building team has completed its iteration 1, then it will hand over it to the deployment team. So first iteration is at deployment stage, second iteration is at building stage. So what is happening? Side by side, that parallelly we are completing several stages in the deployment. So this is what makes the what can development time by reducing with this one. So reducing development time is nothing but this. So parallelly we are doing all these things. So this is what happens with the pipeline execution of developing a software under different stages, under iterations, which have a dedicated duration. Okay, so this is the diagram. Whenever it is asked regarding the time boxing model, you must draw this diagram. Okay, so try to analyze how much fast we are able to receive a product, a software product. So with this time boxing model, the execution time is speeded up. Okay. So in this, let us say that, for example, if the time box duration T is 9 weeks, let us say that a time box which is fixed for the development is 9 weeks and each stage duration is 3 weeks. Try to understand here. Time box duration is 9 weeks. Each stage is 3 weeks. So the first delivery can be made after 9 weeks only because all the stages has to be completed. So every stage contains 3 weeks of time. So it may be the requirements analysis, building and deployment. Every stage will require 3 weeks of time. So to complete one time box, we have 9 weeks time. So the second delivery can be made after 12 weeks and the third week can be made after 15 weeks. So in contrast, this is about pipelined execution, parallel execution. When you go with the linear time boxing model, that is linear sequential model, that is after completing the first time box, if we start the second time box, what do you mean by this? If one time box has finished its total 9 weeks, then only the second time box has to be started. So what is the problem there? So when we compare with this, that is the first delivery is made in the 9 weeks, the second delivery is made in 18 weeks, and the third delivery can be made in 27 weeks. So total development time is 27 weeks with the approach of linear sequencing, linear time boxing model. When we come across the pipelined approach, it may be 15 weeks only. It means that 12 weeks less than the normal time boxing model, which is done through linear way of developing. So this is what happens with the time boxing. It can reduce the development time. And one more thing, there are other issues to be concentrated. Duration of each iteration still the same. Total work done in a time box is also the same. Productivity of a time box is also same. Average cycle time or delivery time has reduced to the third time. That is third. It means that the delivery time is much more less when compared to the other issues, other type of models or the linear way of developing the model. Next, linear execution of iterations. The same team performs all the stages. Okay. Here you try to understand here. First of all, time boxing model can be understood in two ways. One in linear way, second in pipelined way or parallel way. Linear way or parallel way. So in linear execution of iteration, the same team performs all the stages. You try to understand here. When you are going for pipelining approach or parallel approach, there will be a dedicated team for every stage. But here, the same team performs all the stages. So each stage has a team of S. In a linear execution, the team size is S. Okay. In pipeline execution, team size is 3 times, one for each stage. So what happens here is if you go with the linear execution of iterations, more burden will be on the team because they have to look after all the stages. But in pipeline execution, the team size is 3 times because there are different stages are there, different dedicated teams will be there. So the total team size in time boxing is larger than the linear execution of iterations. Yes, obviously, because more manpower will be utilized to develop a product within the time period. Now, this is what happens with the requirements team, building team, deployment team. So, advantages regarding this. Yes, obviously shortened delivery times and distribution execution. And disadvantages are nothing but larger teams are involved in this. And project management is much harder, as I said, because synchronizing, because according to the requirements, according to the time period, you have to adjust all the things within that time box. So management will be a major issue here, and synchronization is also needed. So next, where it can be applied. Time boxing model can be applied in whenever we need a shorter delivery times of a project, then you go for the time boxing model. Okay, this is all about time boxing model. I think everyone understood. If you have any doubts, please raise the questions or else message me or type me any kind of text. Okay, is there any problem in understanding this one? If yes, please write in the chat box or else we will end the session. I hope everyone understood this one.
Sir,
Tell me, who is this?
sir, Tejasri, sir.
Tell me, Tejas.
Sir, notes Rayala, sir.
Notes regarding? It is better to write the points. Or I will send the PPT. It is
Okay,
better, I
sir.
think so. I will send the PPTs. You make a notes of this. You
Okay, sir.
take printout of them. It is better for you to go through the subject.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Is there any doubt
Okay, sir.
regarding the
Thanks.
subject? Regarding the subject,
No.
regarding the concept, is there any problem? Okay. We'll meet in the next class. Thank you one and all.